Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the Spider 32 coming back at you with another video. In this one, we're going to talk about unexplained deaths, mystery, intrigue, which is going to be some random stuff, but I don't know exactly, but hold on for a second. Here it is. If anybody wants to join, but I'm not gonna make this any longer than it should be. So, without further ado, let us begin with our first mystery of the night. Just give me a second. Share screen. Prompt.
Student is labelled a suicide, but his parents believe there is more to their son's death than meets the eye. This is the death of Thomas Burkett. Let's step into the cold. 1st of December 1991, 6:10 p.m. Herndon, Virginia. With an afternoon poetry reading over and done with, Beth and Thomas Burkett returned to their home on Muirkirk Lane. Things hadn't gone to plan that day. Their son, Thomas Calvin Burkett, who was born on the 9th of June 1970 in Pennsylvania and was known as Tommy, had been due to attend a poetry reading with his parents. When Tommy didn't return from a friend's house, his parents left without him. It was clear to Beth and Thomas that something was wrong as soon as they arrived home. Lawn furniture had been thrown about, plants had been broken, and the family dog had been injured. It seemed as though the Burkett's home had been broken into, but the situation was about to get much worse. Tommy's Mustang was parked outside the home when Beth and Thomas returned. Tommy was finally home. Thomas headed upstairs to his son's bedroom. He immediately called 911. Tommy would never see another Thanksgiving holiday. He wouldn't reach his 22nd birthday, and he would never graduate from Marymount College. Thomas found his son's body sitting upright on his bedroom sofa, facing the bedroom door. His clothes were ripped, he had cuts and bruises, his right ear was mangled, and his jaw had been broken. Tommy's feet were crossed at the ankles, and his hands lay in his lap. One of Tommy's hands held a revolver. He had been shot once through the mouth. Thomas saw that the revolver's cylinder was unlatched. This meant one thing. The gun couldn't have been fired like that. As the sirens grew louder, residents of Muirkirk Lane began to wonder what was happening. Neighbours watched as two ambulances approached Muirkirk Lane. The first ambulance turned down the street next to Muirkirk and stopped at the curb. The emergency workers got out and retrieved something from a small ravine. Once they'd gotten back into the ambulance, they slowly drove away without the sirens on. The second ambulance headed straight to the Burkett's home. Before we continue with the events of the 1st of December, it's important to take a look at what happened during the run-up to Tommy's death. Tommy had been spending the Thanksgiving break at home. On the 30th of November, he drove to Centerville, Virginia, to visit a friend from high school. His friend's house was only 7 miles away, and he arrived there a little after 8 p.m. At midnight, an ATM camera recorded Tommy making a withdrawal. 3 white men are seen approaching him. A couple of hours later, Tommy called his parents to tell them he was staying at his friend's house. He planned to be back home around noon, so he could attend a poetry reading with his parents. When Beth and Thomas left home just before noon to run errands, Tommy hadn't returned home. As they left, they heard the sound of tires squeaking. What they didn't see was Tommy's blue Mustang being chased by a large, dark-coloured car. After finishing running errands, Beth and Thomas waited until 2:45 p.m. for their son to arrive home. They eventually left for the poetry reading without him. While the family home was empty, neighbours saw odd goings-on at the Burkett house. A white man driving a dark sedan parked 3 houses down from the Burkett's home. The sedan blocked the entrance to Muirkirk Lane and stayed there for 20 minutes. That same sedan was later seen parked outside the Burkett's home. The vehicle wasn't occupied. It was noted that the house was shrouded in darkness. No one appeared to be home. At 5:10 p.m., an hour before Beth and Thomas arrived home, Tommy's car was seen heading west on Muirkirk Lane and then stopping outside the Burkett's home. The driver was an unidentified white male, and he idled the car until all of the neighbours had gone inside their homes. Beth later said, "Several neighbours reported seeing Tommy's car being chased by a larger, darker car. One neighbour saw the cars coming and he thought, 'This is serious. It's life or death.' Another neighbour reported that one of the cars involved drove through someone's lawn. Tommy's car was apparently run off the road and he was assaulted. He got away from his attackers and made it back to our house. The emergency services arrived at 6:18 p.m. on the 1st of December. They concluded that based on the state of rigour in Tommy's body, he had been dead for several hours. Tommy's body was removed from the house by 7:05 p.m. But by then, a series of events had begun that would cause Beth and Thomas to doubt the official ruling of suicide. Little information is available on this case, and the following information comes from Beth and Thomas, who spoke to unsolve the mysteries about Tommy's death. Fairfax County Police Officer Darrell McEachern was one of the first to respond to the 911 call. When he arrived at the house, he told Tommy's parents, "College students kill themselves all the time. Don't blame yourself." This was before Officer McEachern had seen Tommy's body or the scene itself. Officer McEachern reportedly told the neighbours that statements from them weren't needed, despite what they had witnessed.
Some of us are born with it, continue to nurture it, and sometimes make a career.
To Beth and Thomas, it seemed that Officer McEachern had already concluded that Tommy had killed himself before he arrived at the scene. When the lead detective, Thomas Lyons, entered Tommy's bedroom, he emerged holding a bank deposit slip that had the words, "I want to be cremated," written on it. Beth was confident that the handwriting wasn't Tommy's. Tommy's jacket, wallet, glasses and driver's license were missing from his bedroom. Phone books were missing from the home, and Beth later learned that phone books can be used to absorb blood splatters and to minimize bruising. A baseball bat in Tommy's room was missing its gripping tape. According to Beth and Thomas, the police made no attempt to preserve the scene. Footprints leading from the back door to the small ravine were ignored. Tommy's vehicle wasn't searched for evidence, despite an unidentified man being seen in it. The gun wasn't examined. The scene wasn't photographed. The cuts, bruises and torn clothing weren't noted. Fingerprints weren't dusted for, and no blood samples were taken.
That is
Officer
strange.
Nathan Laney laughed at Beth and Thomas as Tommy's body was taken away. They were then told to, quote, "clean up the mess," end quote, by Detective Lyons. Beth and Thomas preserved the scene themselves and paid for it to be examined privately. It was found that the blood spatter pattern was inconsistent with the position of Tommy's body, and the bullet from the wall behind Tommy's head had not been removed. Poor Kish, a bloodstain expert, said that a spray of small red marks found on the stairs weren't consistent with committing suicide in a room while sitting on a sofa. Kish said a violent incident occurred where the blood was shed. A second autopsy confirmed what the first hadn't mentioned, that Tommy had a broken jaw, a damaged right ear, cuts and bruises. Then there were the inconsistencies in the reports regarding Tommy's death. Detective Lyons wrote the time of injury as 6:10 p.m. and the time of death as 7:30 p.m. despite the emergency services statement that Tommy had been dead for several hours when they arrived at the scene at 6:18 p.m. Fairfax Hospital listed the time of death as 8:30 p.m. When asked about this, Detective Lyons said this was the time Tommy was declared dead at the hospital. The Deputy Chief Medical Examiner for the Northern Virginia region, Dr. J. Byers, performed the autopsy the day after a medical examiner report stated that the time and cause of death had been signed. When the Burketts requested copies of the autopsy photos, Dr. Byers said no photos had been taken, even though he had previously shown Thomas a photo. Beth and Thomas eventually received one photo, a close-up of Tommy's face. The Burketts also learned from a friend who worked in law enforcement that at least one Fairfax County police officer knew of Tommy's death by 3 p.m. Interestingly, Dr. Byers conducted the autopsy of White House aide Vincent Foster after he died in 1993. He ruled the death a suicide. When questioned at a Senate hearing about the ruling in 1994, Dr. Byers said he ruled the death a suicide based on trauma to the jaw and the presence of gunpowder residue. While under oath, Dr. Byers then said that in Tommy's case, he ruled the death a suicide based on the absence of jaw trauma and gunpowder residue. Spurred on by this information, Beth and Thomas continued to investigate. Beth began to wonder if Tommy had called 911 the day of his death. A local dispatcher told Beth that Tommy had made 2 calls, one in August and one in October. When Beth asked about the nature of the calls, the dispatcher told her that Tommy had never called 911. According to Beth, the police department personnel was able to confirm that Tommy did call 911. Beth remembered that Tommy had told her in a phone call that someone had broken into his mailbox at Marymount College around the 12th of November. When he died, Tommy was a junior at the college, where he also worked for student painters and in the admissions office. Since starting the fall 1991 semester, Tommy had been repeatedly harassed by students Philip Howley, the son of a police officer, and Donald Adam McEwen, the grandson of a Marymount College trustee. On the 16th of November, just a few days after his mailbox was broken into, Howley assaulted Tommy so badly that his face was unrecognizable. Campus security didn't report the assault to the Arlington police. A couple of days before Tommy died, his mailbox was broken into again, and mail, including his paycheck, was stolen. Campus security filed a report and spoke to Tommy, saying that the matter would be referred to the Arlington police. It wasn't. After Tommy died, the Board of Trustees at Marymount College refused to speak with the Burketts. The director of campus security, Eric Holes, refused to give Beth and Thomas copies of the reports filed after Tommy was assaulted. He reportedly said, "We're not going around asking questions. We're not going to do anything that would hurt the reputations of other students involved in this."
Not the best.
On the 3rd of December, the Burketts met with Marymount College official Nancy McMahon. She had reportedly told staff not to speak to Tommy's parents. That day, she gave Beth and Thomas Tommy's driver's license, saying a student had given it to her. McMahon wouldn't say who the student was, but it turned out to be Philip Howley. Beth and Thomas came to believe that Tommy was working as an informant for the Drug Enforcement Agency. They were told that their son had been beaten with a baseball bat. Beth and Thomas concluded that because Tommy was working as a Drug Enforcement Agency informant, a group of students dealing drugs on campus plotted to murder him. The Drug Enforcement Agency has officially denied any connection to Tommy. To this day, the Fairfax County Police considers Tommy's death to be a suicide. Over 100 people sent letters to the then Governor Douglas Wilder asking for a state police investigation into Tommy's death. In 1994, Attorney General Janet Reno told the FBI to investigate the way Tommy's case was handled, after receiving letters from legislators and a petition with over 4,000 signatures. However, nothing came of either of these requests. Tommy's parents continued to work hard at finding out the truth regarding their son's death. They founded the organization Parents Against Corruption and Cover-Up. After Beth died from cancer in 2003, the organization's website was taken down. Thomas passed away in 2006, leaving Tommy's sister, Amy, the only surviving member of the Burkett family. Was Tommy murdered, or did he take his own life? Perhaps one day the truth will be known.
Anyone with it? Yes, I personally believe that he was working for the DEA, and that there was something going on at that campus that Tommy knew of something.
At first glance, everything looked to be okay.
I personally believe, in this case, that something was going on at that campus, some kind of illegal activity that was going on at that campus that Tommy knew about, and in order to keep him silent, they sat down here and killed him. And one of the guys they were talking about was in fact a police officer and helped cover up the crime. This is probably one of the reasons why. But if anyone with any information, anyone with any thoughts, any comments, or has any information regarding this case, contact your local law enforcement agency, or hey, leave your comments in the comment section below. Now, with that being said, let's get into the next unsolved mystery. For a minute.
Good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Raven Investigates. Tonight we will be traveling to New Smyrna Beach, Florida, where a mother's worst nightmare comes true, yet she is not above suspicion. We will be looking into a case of a life lost before its time, and a number of confusing circumstances surrounding the child's death. A case where acting calm was seen as suspicious, and the police closing the case as solved despite a jury's decision to acquit. Tonight, we will be investigating the unsolved murder of Dimitri Alexander Moore. April 23rd, 1995, 2 p.m. 8-year-old Dimitri Moore told his mother, Aura Lee Moore, that he was going to go outside and play with his friends. Nothing that was out of the ordinary for an energetic child like himself. The day passed as normal. Nothing seemed, again, out of the ordinary, until the evening came and Dimitri was nowhere to be found. Aura began searching the area for her son, though the search was ultimately fruitless. After a couple hours, at 9 p.m., Aura decided that she needed to get the police involved to search for her son. They continued their search through a sleepless night, but again, to no avail. The next day is when the situation went from tense to worst-case scenario. At 4 p.m., 26 hours after he had left to go outside and play, Dimitri's older brother Damon found his naked body and his clothing in the trunk of his mother's car. The initial belief was that Dimitri had locked himself in the trunk and couldn't escape, but the cause of death was quickly ruled as asphyxiation, and this case immediately became a homicide. It was determined that Dimitri had died between 18 to 24 hours prior, so somewhere between 2 hours after he left, 4 p.m., to 8 hours after he left, 10 p.m. Police immediately turned to Aura Lee for answers, taking her to the station and questioning her for several hours. This happened a number of times, and Aura was the main suspect, and she was questioned a number of times throughout the case. That said, it wasn't until December of 1995 that she was officially arrested. A total of 8 months after Dimitri's death. The trial didn't begin for another 5 months in May of 1996. During the trial, the prosecutor, J. Stephen Alexander, claimed that there were witnesses that saw Dimitri come home at 8 p.m. on the night that he had died, 1 hour before he was reported as missing. From there, he theorized that Dimitri came home dirty, and this made Aura Lee furious. He said that he believed that she threw him in the bathtub, beat him, and then caused him to drown. Then, after he had died, she threw his body into the trunk of her car with his clothes to hide the murder. This story was formed due to the injuries on his body. He was found with bruises and cigarette burns, and the fact that the clothing in the trunk was wet. Furthermore, the medical examiner noted that his body had been thoroughly cleaned. On top of this, Alexander stated that Aura had inconsistencies in her story, and that she was too calm and lacking urgency in the disappearance of her son. Lastly, she had also made comments to journalists about how she had not smothered nor drowned her son. But this statement was made prior to the cause of death being publicly released by the police. This may sound like it's a clear-cut situation. She knew things that only the killer would likely know, right? Well, as always, it's not that easy. During the trial, there was a video that was shown of Aura's interrogation. During said interrogation, the investigator mentioned Dimitri's cause of death multiple times, meaning that this fact was definitely hammered into her head. On top of that, while the neighbors testified that they could hear conversations through the dividing wall, there was nothing suspicious that occurred on the night of Dimitri's death. Also, the forensic pathologist stated flat out that the injuries Dimitri had suffered could have easily come from an altercation with another group of boys. The presentation of information from both sides was taken into consideration, and the jury deliberated. On June of 1996, over a full year after his death, they determined that Aura Lee Moore had not killed her son. The police, however, disagreed, and decided to mark the case as closed, and that she had killed him. Because of this, the case was officially solved and no other investigation was pursued for almost another full year. In February of 1997, the state, not the local precinct, decided to reopen the case under the belief that local boys had possibly killed Dimitri. Interestingly, there was a group of boys that lied to the police about having seen him that day. They claimed they hadn't at first, but then a number of witnesses said that they had seen several of the boys bullying Dimitri, pinning him to the ground, and forcing him to eat dirt. From this, the newest theory was that some of the neighborhood boys had picked a fight with Dimitri, who was a smaller kid, and accidentally killed him during the fight. It is also believed that the parents of said boys helped to cover up the crime by cleaning his body and putting him in the trunk of Aura's unlocked car. Aura stated that while they were searching for her son, 2 women approached her at a local basketball court and told her about Dimitrik getting into a fight down by the railroad tracks. This led to them searching the tracks, and she believes that this gave them the opportunity to put him in her trunk. That is where the official information on this case ends. There has been no real movement on this case, and despite the fact that she was acquitted of all charges, the local police still insist that she was guilty, and this case is officially marked as closed. Covering the info about the family and the police suspecting them, the character of the family has been well documented. Dimitrik was a straight-A student and was considered highly intelligent for his age. Aura stated that she practically never had to discipline him, and when she did, it was more likely that he would be sent to his room than anything. His brother, who was 21 at the time of this whole event, was known to have adored his baby brother and would have never have hurt him. Lastly, her boyfriend, Anthony, also loved Dimitrik and was stated to have treated him like his own son. Dimitrik was also a karate student, one that was taught throughout the entire course that he should try to de-escalate a fight before having to defend himself. It's likely that if the boys had been picking on him and hitting him, he would have attempted to talk to them first, but may have ended up in a fight. Unfortunately, him being smaller in stature, he likely would have been overpowered, and if he had fought back, that may have increased the aggression of his attackers, leading to his accidental demise. To add to the humiliation of Aura being indicted, it was stated on record to the Orlando Sentinel that her attorney had to stop her testimony due to the one-sidedness of the questioning. He stated that she was repeatedly interrupted and the grand jurors were barraging her with questions. He also stated that a number of the jurors were aggressive with her, which indicated a full-on bias and immediate belief that she was guilty. Lastly, it was also stated that one juror fell asleep during the session and was caught snoring during the questioning. Obviously, if this is all true, there was no unbiased grand jury. From here, he decided that a trial by jury was ultimately necessary. I've also read an interesting conflict of schedules from the Sentinel, one that is not the same as what Unsolved Mysteries documented. They stated that Dimitrik went to play next door, and that Aura went to a church meeting at 3 p.m. and returned by 4 p.m. From there, Dimitrik had not returned by 6:30, and she had concluded that he had gone shopping with her sister-in-law's family. When he hadn't come back by 9, she called the police. At 10:30 p.m., she had to go to work, which I understand. She was a nurse's aide making $12,000 a year, and she probably couldn't afford to miss a day of work. Despite this, she had gotten a call at midnight that he hadn't been found, and then she took the rest of her shift to try to find him. Now, look at those hours. It was stated that he had died between 4 p.m. and 10 p.m. She had returned from her church meeting at 4 p.m. and had called the police by 9 p.m. to report him missing. By 10, she was at work. So, if she was involved, it would have had to have been between 4 and 9, which is technically a 5-hour gap. However, please note that she was seen looking for him prior to calling the police, so that timeline for her to be involved just keeps getting shorter. Another thing to add, it's been stated that the police were apparently told by neighborhood boys that Dimitrik had been seen getting beat up at a park near his home. Apparently, the police stated that this was not an important lead and chose not to follow up on it. Now, it's also important to not be one-sided about this. It's critical to note that Aura Lee did call the police to report her son missing, but did not call 911. She instead called the regular telephone line number to the police station. It was also noted that during the call, she told the police that she had already contacted the neighbors and friends and that they were already searching for Dimitrik. This statement was contradicted by the statement of neighbors who told the police that she had not spoken to them about it. It was also reported to the police approximately 10 minutes before the call to the police that Aura was seen in her front yard arguing with her 21-year-old son, Damon. It was once again also stated that it was curious that she had gone to work the night her son had been reported missing. But it was also reported that she said she would be fired if she didn't show up. So this is one of those situations where she could have been freaking out internally, but made it a point to remain calm. She was a nurse's aide, and again, she didn't make much money. $12,000 annually isn't a lot of money to support a family. It could have been a situation of, I can't lose our place, and I need to buy food, so I have to go to work and not get fired even though my son is missing. It's relevant, but it is difficult to make a judgment on that situation. It's also relevant to add that Aura was polygraphed 3 separate times, and she failed all 3. While this doesn't make her a criminal, it does call her credibility into question. There was a comment on Reddit that caught my eye, made by someone that claimed to know the mother and claimed they lived near her when this happened. They stated that the police refused to fingerprint the car despite Aura begging them to do so. They also said they knew the 4 boys had lied to the police about having seen Dimitri, and they were considered suspects after the fact. According to this person, 2 of the boys ended up in prison on death row for child abuse-related deaths, and that one of them had burned his child with a cigarette. Now, of course, I technically have no way of verifying this, as the person's name was never released. They were a minor at the time of this incident. But if that comment is true, it does speak to the character of those 2 people. This is a bit of a rarity for this segment, but there are pretty much just 2 suspects in this situation. The first is Aura Lee Moore, Dimitri's mother. It is possible that she killed her son, though I will say that the prosecutor's version of events was pure speculation, and built only on the possibilities versus the actual evidence. That said, it's possible that she got mad at him for coming home dirty, it is possible that she assaulted him, and it is possible that she drowned him. Again, it's all possible. But the question is it probable or certain? And the answer, in my opinion, is no. The second is the group of neighborhood boys that was seen bullying Dimitri. Now, murder is a long stride to take from simple bullying, though it does sound like, from witness testimony, the boys were escalating their assaults. Forcing someone to eat dirt while holding them down is pretty messed up. And that's not something that happens on the first encounter typically either. On top of that, if he had attempted to defend himself, it may have caused things to get worse. Also, there's that Reddit comment, which, if legit, and the 2 boys did grow up to be murderers, well, it's definitely a possibility. One point of curiosity on the boys that were suspects: were any of them related to police officers? Now, I ask this because, as the mother speculated, it feels like if they were responsible for his death and tried to clean the body, someone would have had to have helped these kids do that. Yeah. Someone with knowledge of washing evidence off a body. Someone with the wherewithal to get the mother and brother away from the house to hide him in the trunk. Someone, potentially, with forensic knowledge and influence in an investigation. I'm just saying, it would explain why the police marked this case as closed, despite the jury saying that it absolutely wasn't. Disclaimer: this is my opinion, solely my opinion only. It is not your opinion. It is not necessarily a popular opinion nor an unpopular opinion. It is solely the opinion of As the Raven Dreams. In my opinion, once again, the mother was innocent. She had nothing to do with her son's death. In my opinion, those boys murdered Dimitri in their bullying. My mind can easily picture them pinning him down and then forcing dirt into his mouth. Then maybe he spit it back at them, and one of the bullies grabbed him by the neck to hold his mouth open and ultimately killed him. It is my opinion that those kids are all guilty, either of the murder itself or just being an accessory. The fact that the police were so adamant that the mother was the murderer is, honestly, suspect to me. If I had to guess, they were either purposely misled or the investigation was influenced by someone. I don't have any evidence that the police were connected to the boys, but something about that just seems really strange. Now, unfortunately, we passed the 25th anniversary of Dimitrich's death a couple of months ago. 25 years that his mother and brother, who is now 46, have had to live knowing that there has never been justice in this killing. Again, if that Reddit comment is to be believed, then the two boys involved are on death row at this point. Maybe if they were involved, they'll confess someday. Maybe they'll tell someone in their last moments of life, or maybe they will just take it to the grave. If that comment's a lie, then it's more likely that all four of them are still out there and will never be charged. Unfortunately, just being a Reddit comment, there's no way to verify it. I could reach out to the person, but if they wanted to double down and tell me that they were there, I would have no way of confirming or deconfirming that. So, the fact that this case on paper is closed and that Aura Lee is officially marked as her son's murderer is, honestly, it's sickening. I feel sorry for her and Damon, and I feel sorry for everyone that knew this very intelligent young man. It's truly a sad fact that he could have made something for himself and he could have gone on to be successful in anything he wanted to do, but all that just got ripped away from him. But, my friends, I have to ask, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think Dimitrich was murdered by a group of other boys that had been known to bully him? Do you think his mother had anything to do with his death, and do you think there was a possibility of police cover-up? Or, do you have any other thoughts and opinions on this case? Please let me know in the comments down below. I would genuinely love to hear what you think. Unfortunately, that's all I have to say about this case. But please, do consider joining me next time on another episode of Raven Investigates Still Unsolved Mysteries. Until that time.
Like I said, what do you think about this case? Anybody with any thoughts or any opinions, please leave it at the comment section below. Leave it on the comment section below. Or if you have any other information in regards to this case, please contact your local law enforcement agency. With that being said, that's going to do it for me, Robert Stack. Waits. I think somebody is watching. Okay. Well, I think I have time to do one more. Or not. Okay, let's do one more. Let's do another one. Let's just do one more. Yeah, let's just, yeah.
Good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Raven Investigates Still Unsolved Mysteries. Tonight, we actually won't be going very far in our travels. We're going to be heading a bit north from the Raven's Nest to the city of Powhatan, Kansas, and looking into a case of a soon-to-be mother that had her life and future stolen from her. This case is one that has no real answers, and the technicality of an entire Native American tribe being suspect in the murder. Tonight, we will be investigating the unsolved murder of Jody Lynn Bordeaux. The Kickapoo Reservation, home of the Kickapoo Native American tribe, is a 5-mile by 6-mile large reservation approximately 5 miles west of Horton, Kansas, located in Powhatan. This reservation, like most others in the United States, is run by an elected governing body known to this tribe as the Kickapoo Tribal Council. As of October of 2018, the total membership of the tribe was approximately 1,610. Today's case takes us back a couple decades to the mid to late 90s. The Bordeaux family, at the time made up of Sean and Jody Lynn Bordeaux, lived in this small farmhouse on the reservation. Both of them worked for the Kickapoo-owned Golden Eagle Casino. Sean, who was part Lakota, and Jody were both part of the management team. It was their job to oversee and direct the everyday dealings of the casino. It should be noted that while Sean was part Native American, albeit Lakota, based on everything I could find, Jody was not. It's also important to note that at one point, Jody was promoted to staff supervisor of the slot machine department. She was given authority to oversee the employees' performance and file reports about their behavior. While they both had some authority, every major decision made had to go through the Kickapoo Tribal Council. If an employee's behavior didn't improve, Jody had the authority to bring them before the council for either probation or termination. As stated before, the Bordeaux family was, at the time, solely Sean and Jody. However, they were trying to have a child. After a number of failed pregnancies and after meeting with a fertility expert extensively, everything finally worked out for the two of them, and Jody became pregnant with a baby girl. Now, I know that some of this information I've mentioned so far may feel like it isn't relevant or is superfluous to this case, but in one way or another, it does all relate to what happened. As stated, part of Jody's job was to report on employee behavior and bring them in front of the council if their performance did not improve. There was one employee that was listed as often being tardy, having a bad attitude, and also having a personal disgust with the fact that Jody had a high position at the casino. He was also known to have accused her of making up excuses to get out of work. All of this information was reported to the council by Jody. Council decided that the employee would be put on a probationary period and told to clean up his act if he wanted to keep his job. Unfortunately, the message apparently did not get through to him. He continued to be tardy and aggressive. Because of this, the council opted to fire him. A few weeks later, in an obvious move of retaliation, he filed a grievance against Jody, claiming that she had been consistently late to work. Sean, Jody's husband, attempted to refute the claim that she was just simply not showing up on time. He informed the council that she had been going to the fertility clinic as they were trying to have a family, and that she was staying later in the afternoon to make up for the time lost at the beginning of the shift. Despite this, the council opted to fire her as a result of said grievance. For the next month, Judy petitioned the council to get her job back. During one of the meetings, it was agreed that they would consider giving it back to her, but it would need to be discussed further. Not too long after this decision, the family started receiving disturbing and threatening anonymous phone calls where the caller would just hang up. From there, we move forward to the night of November 21st, 1997. Sean and Jody were in their living room in the middle of the night having a fairly standard evening. Suddenly, they started to hear their dog barking at something they couldn't see, and then started hearing a strange noise outside. Immediately after, the house was riddled with bullets. The two of them got out of the living room in an attempt to escape the gunfire. It is stated by Sean that Jody got to the bedroom door before he did, stopped, turned around to see if he was okay, and was then struck in the head with one of the rounds. From here, Sean has stated that he immediately knew that Jody was dead, but still called 911 in an attempt to try to save their unborn daughter. Unfortunately, there was nothing that could be done, and this case became a double homicide. The police came to the scene and investigated, but very little progress has been made. It's believed by officials that there were multiple shooters, and they have identified a number of suspects, but the case has been hit with one major roadblock: the lack of trust between the Kickapoo tribe and the non-Native American law enforcement. There's also an internal fear throughout the tribe that if anyone is to speak up and help law enforcement in this case, they will face retribution. Unfortunately, due to the aforementioned statement, there isn't much in ways of extra information on this case. Apparently, Jody was good at her job, but not very well respected in her position. A number of people that worked at the casino refused to see her as a superior, and they didn't believe that she should hold a high position at the casino, seeing as how she was not part of the tribe. When she was being reconsidered for the position, apparently that information spread throughout the reservation very quickly and everyone was aware of it. Obviously, the most likely speculation is that Jody's murder had something to do with her employment. There were 3 suspects officially, one of which was the disgruntled employee, but it's firmly believed that there were multiple people involved. On top of this, when Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack did their segment on this case, a number of people on the reservation refused to do interviews because they had received threatening phone calls basically telling them not to go on the show. Apparently, Sean and Jody had contacted the police a few times prior to report suspicious activity outside of their home, which would have most likely been the attackers casing the house, but nothing ever came of it. Despite this, when he called 911 after the shooting, the 911 operator claimed ignorance to his location, and he had to repeatedly tell them where he was. This led to a significant delay in the emergency services getting to the scene. Approximately 15 minutes had passed between him contacting 911 and them actually arriving. In addition to this, Sean has stated that the police handled the crime scene in the wrong way. He said they had left his wife's body in the house well into the next day, and that he was shut out for over 4 days. When he was finally allowed back into the house, he and his grandfather went in and did a smudging, a Native American ritual used for spiritual cleansing and blessing, and then packed his belongings. Sean also attempted to get the FBI involved in this case, but they immediately refused to touch it due to jurisdiction issues. Interestingly enough, the farmhouse they lived in was technically just outside the actual reservation by around half a mile. In addition to Sean's request, several former Kickapoo leaders actually sent a letter to the U.S. Attorney General requesting assistance in this investigation. Lastly, and most interesting, this is not the only unsolved murder on this reservation. I don't have any additional information on those other cases at this point in time, but there were supposedly at least 2 other unsolved murders on this reservation that have also been met with the previously stated roadblocks. This case actually goes the opposite direction from most cases that I cover on this series, whenever it comes to suspects. I actually have to say that it has too many suspects to just point one out and say that's possible. There comes a point where, when you have an outsider working in a position of power in one of the tribe's most lucrative businesses, there's going to be animosity. We know of one specific case of animosity against Jody, and that's the employee that was fired due to her reports. The officials have also stated they have 2 other suspects in mind, but there's not enough evidence to even give names on who they are, and no arrests have ever been made. With the fact that there were most likely multiple shooters, and that there were a number of people that did not like Jody, technically, anyone in the tribe that was an adult at the time of her murder could be considered a suspect. This statement puts literally everybody investigating this at an obvious disadvantage. The people responsible have the tribe protecting them, and they're also open to threatening people with violence if they even think about talking about it. This is interestingly both my shortest and technically longest list of suspects. Anyone from the angered employee to everyone complacent in hiding the crime is a suspect. Disclaimer. This is my opinion, solely my opinion only. It is not your opinion. It is not necessarily a popular opinion, nor an unpopular opinion. It is solely the opinion of As the Raven Dreams. My opinion on this case is simple, and is one that you may likely agree with as well. That employee that was fired wanted revenge. He started with trying to ruin her life by getting her fired. Then, when she was being reconsidered for the job, he opted to end her life in the most gruesome way imaginable. This was, in my honest opinion, a professional hit on someone that members of the tribe saw as an outsider overstepping their bounds. I believe the official statement that there were multiple shooters and that this was plotted out for a while. The attack was too well orchestrated, and with the number of rounds shot into the house, there's no way the intent was just to scare her or Sean. They entered the property with the intention to kill anyone and everyone in that house. In the nearly 23 years since he lost both his wife and unborn daughter, Sean has moved back to his hometown in the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota, where he's actually a member of the South Dakota House of Representatives. He's moved on with his life as best he can, making the most of his time, but the pain of this loss is still obvious. And it's amplified even more by those that remain silent about what they know. It's a sad truth, but one spoken all too often when looking at unsolved mysteries. You will likely never know who murdered Jody Bordeaux. I know this is one of my shortest episodes, and I'm sorry for that, but this case is one that needs to be covered, in my opinion, but there's not a lot of information out there. Obviously, the document in my description does have my sources, and I do implore you to please go check those out. But just know the roadblocks in the Kickapoo tribe that have absolutely silenced people who want to speak about this case are very, very real. You can't find information about what happened. Nobody has spoken since it happened. It's basically just investigating silence at this point. I am very sorry to Sean for his loss. And unfortunately, and I'm sure he knows this as well, being Native American and living on a reservation, it's highly likely that nothing will ever come of this case. The people who are protecting the murderers are unfortunately complacent in doing so. It may be a thing of protecting people of the tribe. Maybe they feel threatened, but it's still a situation of complacency. Again, it's really unfortunate that this case won't ever have an answer, or if it does have an answer, the people who are hiding the information will have to have passed away. All that said, and I do have to ask, what do you guys think? Do you think this was an orchestrated hit on the family? Or do you think this was one disgruntled employee that took revenge? Or do you maybe have your own theories on what may have happened? Have you researched this case? Have you looked into it? And have you established information that I didn't cover? If so, let me know in the comments or send me an email. If you want to email me, it's astheravendreams@outlook.com. I'll see you on the next episode of Raven Investigates. Next.
Like I said, what are your thoughts on this case? Anybody that has any thoughts or any opinions or has any information concerning this case, please contact your local law enforcement agency. Or do you have any thoughts or opinions of what may have happened to Jody Bordeaux? Leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. And that being said, this is Robert Stack. That's going to do it for me. I'm going to be out of here. Instead, this is the Spider 32 signing off.